the Women's Rights Until Justice is Ours Capitol Rally and Temple Picket, October 2nd, 1982, which you were at. And at that now conference where Ben and I spoke, I won this at the raffle, so I was really happy to put this in my archives. Eventually this will be housed here or someplace where we can have a safe archival vault, I guess. But the greatest memory I have of Lucy is midnight in the forest at Camp Rogers, up past Camas, doing our very first public fairy ritual around a fire. Brenda and Maureen were there, Ben was there. Was anyone else there? Becky, were you there?
No, we heard about it, but I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah.
We did this beautiful ritual together. It was just very free-flowing, etc. But the culmination of it was Lucy doing this guided meditation where we held hands around the fire, and she visualized a beautiful pink bubble in the center of the fire, and she had to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it covered the circle where we were, and then that forest, and then it just got bigger and bigger, and eventually she had it encompassing the world, and I was going, where is she going with this? And right at the apex of it, she popped that pink bubble and sent queer love out to the cosmos. And it was so empowering and fabulous and delicious. And I know we created some really powerful magic that night to bring queer healing and progress and liberation to this very difficult place that we live in, you know. So, with that, I give you Luci Malin.
And in case you don't know, these are all famous Utah people. And Maude, it was a famous actress. I've talked to people who said, she's a lesbian? I'm like, well, duh. But, in Paris, London, at the turn of the century, she was, hi, Rob, sorry. She was very renowned actress. And actually, this Claire, my wife, who's in the front here, and I named our RV Maude for her. And we have her picture, and she travels with us. So, and what Rocky was talking, okay, Connell used to be Rocky, and I have a really hard time with Connell, but I'm getting there. I'm
That's
better.
all right. You can call me
But anyway,
Rocky.
that is the raising the cone of power, that Starhawk ritual that she has captured in her book, one of her books on magic and rituals. So I know he wants to follow me as I sit down. But so I'm going to sit, but I want this to be sort of an open discussion, and I'm just going to, I have a rough list of approximately chronological events, but in my brain they do all get mixed up. I can't remember what came when, but I did come here as a missionary for the Equal Rights Amendment, which was a project that the National Organization for Women had in starting in about 1980 to the end of the ERA possibility, which was June 30th of 82. So the Equal Rights Amendment is the only amendment that's had a very short term, 7 years term, of which to get all the states to ratify. So there is a group now that's debating the legality of that. And we need one more state right now to ratify, and they are going to, if they do that, and it could be, let's see, which is the state that's just about there? I think it's Virginia, but there'll be a lawsuit about, you know, we have ratified and we have the 3/4 of the states that need to go through that process. Like any other amendment, except for the Equal Rights Amendment, you don't have a deadline. So, and it does take years and years and years to get some of these amendments passed. So when we realized that now the National Organization for Women, well, wait a minute, let me back up. I remember driving after graduate school. I just graduated in 1978. I graduated after a winter quarter. So I was driving to Corvallis, where my first job was, listening to the radio, going up I-5 from UC Davis on just straight up to Corvallis. And the news came about on the radio about Harvey Milk. It was, I think, November 27th, 1978. And then the news came on about the Briggs Initiative, which was in California. At that time, it was a law that would have prevented anyone who was lesbian or gay from teaching. It would have prevented anybody from talking about it. And if you knew a lesbian and gay person and didn't tell, you could be fired. I mean, other teachers, it was a horrible piece of legislation, which luckily was defeated. But these were, we think we're in really awful times today, and we are, but there were awful times before. So, and we lived through them, and we're stronger for it. So when I got to Corvallis, I was fresh out of graduate school. I was straight, I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing really, and I was looking around for a community. So, and I was in range management animal science, which is a male-dominated field. There weren't very many women that I was meeting. So I went to there was a women's center on that campus at Oregon State University, and I went there, and they said, well, I think you'd be interested in this NOW thing, National Organization for Women, and they meet Tuesday nights. So I went over to one of those meetings, and was just very intrigued by what I heard and saw. And this was a group of, from my viewpoint, mostly straight women. And they all had buttons on that said, I am a lesbian. The whole room, like if everybody in this room had that button on. And it was an amazing experience for me. Like, who knew who was, I mean, it was like, well, what? So it was a consciousness raising moment that, when we take on these identities, it weakens their power to be used against you. And I was exploring, coming out at that point, and did come out when I was in Corvallis. But I was on a short-term, time-limited grant, and the money ran out, and I, looking for something else. So I went at that time in it was 80, I think. I went to the big National NOW conference in Washington, D.C. And those NOW conferences, they are invigorating, wonderful events. They were. I mean, I really enjoyed them, got a lot out of them. But they were recruiting actively for people to help with the Equal Rights Amendment. They had a program called Change Your Life for the ERA. And you went and talked to somebody, sort of did a really casual interview, and they said, well, you can go here, here, or here. What do you want to do? And I ended up coming to Salt Lake City, initially to stay for about 3 weeks, because what the National NOW board at that time was made up of a lot of ex-Mormon women, strong feminists, but they knew how to organize. They're Mormons. It's one thing Mormons know how to do. So we've copied their proselytizing scheme, and we trained people to go in, cut 2 by 2, knock on the door and say, we didn't say barrier to my testimony, but I'd like to talk to you about the Equal Rights Amendment. And we had a big precinct map on the wall, and we mark off where people had gone, and 2 by 2 people would go out and we're talking to people about the Equal Rights Amendment, what it would do, and that it's nothing scary. And, it was, and then what we were doing was training the people. I ended up staying and being a trainer. We trained people who came to Utah to learn how to do this, and then they went to the states where it was really possible, which was Illinois, North Carolina, Florida, and one other, can't remember. But anyway, so people were going all over the country trying to make sure, these were the states that we targeted, that where it was possible we could ratify if everything went okay. So that's what I was here. The office was right over here. It was on State Street and 13th South. It's a tattoo parlor now. But it was a very galvanizing time here in Utah. The whole women's community came together. I mean, all the women. The lesbians were only a small part of it. It was all these feminists sort of loosely united and very dedicated to the Equal Rights Amendment purpose. And there was lots and lots of activity going on, and people opened up their houses to these people who were coming through. You got assigned a house and you stayed with that person. and it was really a lot of fun and a lot of work. But and then when that June 30th deadline came, and I think some of you, we gathered at Sugar House Park that evening and sort of commiserated because it was all over. And at least that was the thought of that at that time. So, and feminism is totally basic to my notion of lesbianism. I mean, first I'm a feminist, that women are equal and able to, I don't want to say compete, but live with men and work and together to achieve anything they want in any aspect of society. That's what feminism is to me. And yeah, I did meet Rocky and Robert and Ben and some other men, and you know, once they sort of understood that, they said, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm a feminist," and that's sort of been my rule for men who are my friends. Is first they have to be feminist, and then I'll talk to you. So, and there are a lot of feminist men around, I have discovered. So, and let's see, I guess I could just from that I could say, in Oregon at that time, when I was there, separatism was on the rise. And there were many women who were trying to live a life completely separate from men. And it's a very hard thing to do because you can't work in the straight economy and not be working with or for men. And these women were trying to do that. They didn't want to buy anything from the store because that meant you were supporting men. And they're growing all their own food, living out, in a rural area, trying to generate their own electricity. It was a hard life. But there were a lot of women who were doing it. And I think there still are a few enclaves. But separatism was a powerful notion to me at that time. That once you think about it, that slogan of a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, that's really true. I mean, what in general do we need men for? I mean, so, I got over it, but that's where I was at that time. So that separatism area is very interesting, and someone needs to write a book about it. It really was quite the thing. Oregon is a strange state in that Portland and then down the Willamette Valley, that's where the liberal people are, and then down in Ashland. And the rest of it is like, it's not KKK, but it's very, it's all white, it's redneck, and it's not, when people say, oh, Oregon's wonderful, well, it is wonderful if you're in the Willamette Valley or Ashland, but there's other places, or maybe on the coast, the northern coast, but it's very redneck. So some of these women were really running into a lot of problems that were trying to do this stuff, but where was I going with that? So coming from that and coming to Utah, and then the first thing I asked when I got to the NOW office is, well, where are the lesbians? And they're like, what? And I was directed to 20 Rue Jacob, which was the women's bookstore and coffee shop, which is now Moochie's. Sometimes I go in that Moochie's building. And if you guys don't know Moochie's, it's big grinder men sandwiches, lots of meat, and I've gone in there and said, do you realize that this place is all testosterone now, but it used to be estrogen. This was the lesbian center of activity in Utah for a few years. Abby Maestas, Marilyn Haig, and Ingrid is right there, Davies. Started this collective after they went to the Michigan Women's Festival. So there's any of these subjects that I'm talking about, like women's festivals, you could write a book on the women's festivals. It was an amazing time. Many thousands of women would show up on this land in Michigan, and it'd be a huge gathering and celebration. And it was very diverse, but yet united. They would have this was when it was okay to drink. You'd have alcohol here, weed here, straight, nothing here, children here. I mean, you could find your place in the audience, and you just sort of staked out your area, and that's where you went. And then there were camping areas that were also designated like that. And it was just great fun. All the women musicians, the women's music era is that's a whole nother book right there. There were hundreds of women who were going around this country singing and folk songs and other types of music and providing it for women. Holly Near, Meg Christian, Chris Williamson, Margie Adams.
Judy Fiel.
Judy Fiel was a friend of mine from Oregon who I brought here, and she did many concerts here for us. And she did them at 20 Rue Jacob Coffee House, small. These other ones were big. Babs was involved with producing them and some other people. And there could be a book written about Babs too, by the way. Just Babs and everything that she has done, Babs DeLay. So that music era and it's part of my essential fiber, and other women here too. I mean, I know how my mother would perk up when I don't know, one of those old crooner, Bing Crosby or somebody came on. It's not going to be Bing Crosby for me. It's going to be these lesbian singers. When I have Alzheimer's, I can't remember anything else but music. I mean, that was the root of my connection. So, and we had all those people, all those women, Barbara Higbee, Teresa Trollo, and Chris Williamson were just here in October, but they came back, they were here in the late 80s, early 90s. We had these big concerts. Kingsbury Hall, I think once we had rented for, was it Holly or Chris? I can't remember, one of them, or maybe it was both of them. But generally we would be at the Unitarian churches, those smaller venue. And the Unitarian churches nationwide, worldwide, are the home of many lesbian and gay activities. So we had many dances. Brenda and Maureen were married at First Church in 1990.
Yeah, right.
And that was before anybody was doing this. They both wore white gowns, and we had a huge celebration. It was a wonderful moment. But things like that were happening. People would say, how can you live in Utah? I said, it's a remarkable place. And one of the reasons I liked living here was I'm pretty political, and it's easy to do politics here. This is small potatoes. This is like a smaller county in California. You go up to the legislature, that's like a county in California. And California has, Sacramento is the north, and that's where the power is, but all the people are in the south, and and they have their own, and there's ACLU of the north and the south, and Planned Parenthood of the north and the south, and we didn't have any of that here. And it was very common that Carol is being with abortion rights in some way, or ACLU or something, and we'd all be together in one room, all the leaders of these various organizations, like now. I know I'm rambling, so anyway. I did, after the Equal Rights Amendment left here, or we stopped working on that, I got very involved in the National Now arena and was elected to the National Board. And that was a really fun time for me because I got to fly all over this country we'd have our Now board meetings in a different city. Well, they sort of, every other one was not in DC. So they're mostly in Washington, but then everywhere, Austin, San Antonio, Miami, Atlanta. We never came here for a board meeting, but that was really a nice way to get to know this country and to meet wonderful people and to know that there was hope, because there's feminists everywhere. And you think Texas is, or you probably think of Texas, but the women in Texas, let me tell you, they're a different breed. And they are powerful, strong feminists. And, being in a room with Ann Richards and Barbara Jordan was like, be still my heart. These are, it was really something. And we were just talking Molly Ivins. We're talking somewhere on the internet. We're talking about that today. These are all Texas women, and they really are something else. So anyway, so being on the Now board, and I did that for 5 years, was really a great opportunity. And then I was Utah Now president until about 2000. I got breast cancer at that time and backed out, and no one came in. Doesn't mean that no one filled the void. So times had changed. But through Now, we did dances. There was Lesbian Task Force. There was all sorts of things going on. Prior to that, Women Aware was the big women's group. and it was it wasn't exactly hidden, but you sort of had to know somebody to get into that system of information. And Women Aware had dances, primarily dances, but other activities. I remember Leslie Agutter, she was very involved with that. And, some of these older feminists, it was a way to connect, which is something I think lesbian and gay people are always looking for, to find each other or to find people who will accept, not tolerate, and, not abide, but accept and wholly welcome and include us into their society. I'm not so wild about the total mainstreaming that's happened now. I mean, we've lost our specialness as a self-identified group, because now, Melissa Etheridge, she's a lesbian, so what? I mean, it's just like, that used to be something that was very unique and wonderful. Let's see. So there began to be a series of West Coast music festivals, because Michigan is pretty far to travel. And this was generally, a middle class to lower middle class working group. People had jobs. It took 3 days to drive to Michigan, and then you were at Michigan for a week and 3 days to drive back. That was a lot of time. So the West Coast started up. Robin Tyler was very involved with that, and there were some in Southern California a couple years, and then it was in Northern California. It really didn't take hold in the way it could have, but those were remarkable events too. And lots of caravans from here went to the West Coast activities. Let's see. So going back to the ERA missionary project, Sonia Johnson was very vocal and proudly thought of by people in Salt Lake. She came here a couple times. She was from Virginia. She was not from Utah. And if you haven't read her book, From Housewife to Heretic, you should read it, because it is profound. I mean, she really had a huge epiphany about how the Mormon Church was using her and other women and women power to run a church that suppressed women and kept them in their place and didn't provide any opportunity really for advancement. So it's a really interesting book, and she's an interesting woman. She did that, and she had 5 kids or something, I can't remember, but she eventually divorced and became a lesbian, and then she called herself a lesbian separatist, and now she calls herself cosmopolitan separatist or something. She's living in Tucson. She's still alive.
Gail Rosica will ever follow.
Gail. So that's something that I never understood. Why do people in the legislature give Gail so much power? But anyway, never mind. Let's see.
Because she helps them suppress women.
Yeah, she does. She still does. And so did Phyllis Schlafly. Who was a lawyer and never stayed home in her life, but advocated that women stay home and take care of the children and their husband. I mean, there's all these hypocritical situations that were going on that were sort of angering. But let's see. There was always a newsletter that went on, and of some sort, about women's events. Now had a newsletter, but there was another women's newsletter, Satu, a woman who
The triangle.
spent
South
out.
Pacific, yeah.
Yeah, she really spent all her time writing that newsletter for several years, and then it sort of passed to the hands of Kathy Worthington, I believe, who did it for years and years and years, and then eventually we sort of got we don't need that lesbian information newsletter because it's more public and we're not all hiding in the closet. People are out. So, but the newsletter was very important because it was a way for people to find out what was going on, women, where they could connect, what was happening in the various bars. Puss in Boots was a famous lesbian bar over on Redwood Road and about 9th South, Indiana. And it was a dive, but everybody went there. So it was quite the place. It was always crowded. The old Sun, I mean the Sun that's where the Delta Center is now, that was quite the place too when I first got here. People would meet there, congregate. Puss in Boots was the only woman's bar, and there were several men gay bars that women were not really welcome at. 8, Kevin says. Okay. Or 7, was that 7? And yeah, okay. But the Sun always made room for women, and you didn't feel ostracized when you went there. So once that was torn down, then there was the other Sun that got killed by the tornado. So anyway, a couple of other women's bars came and went. Modickity's was Babs's, I can't say these words, bar, and that was down on State Street and 39th. And then across the street and down a block was
Paper Moon.
Paper Moon. I was going to say Half Moon, that's not right. Paper Moon. But now they're all gone. So, thing of the past. But that was a primary place to meet women, and that's what people did in those days. And I remember once I was in a therapy session, and I said, I don't want to go to the bar. She said, well, if you're in the bar, there's someone else like you in the bar. And I mean, I don't know, it just was, that was the place that you had to go if you wanted to congregate and, you know, have a social life.
Or the softball field.
Oh yeah, softball.
Were the women's bars harassed by the police?
And not that I'm aware of. It wasn't like I think the men's bars could be. So does anybody know that?
The parking lot was dangerous.
The parking lot was
Yeah,
dangerous.
that Puss in Boots.
That's true.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah, I was always in a group, big group. So,
I think
But
there was
yeah.
more trouble from people bashing people than the police.
Yeah.
You know, that's the real danger going to the bars, was being bashed, going in and out of the bars.
yeah, and that was really definitely part of the men's bar scene. The fear and the, you know, that you were walking through to get in there.
Did BYU security ever harass or collect license plates numbers outside
Oh yeah, and
Puss in Boots like they did? at
well,
the
Puss in
Sun?
Boots, you had, in the olden days, you had to sign in. These were private clubs, and you had to have a membership, and you had to sign in. And so
It's a long story.
people did all sorts of, I mean, you know, they'd sign in with false information, or, well, I mean, there was all that stuff, and there's a long story about when one of those books got taken to court as evidence that someone was a lesbian, in a
Violence.
it was a basketball, I can't remember the details, but anyway. Were you involved in that case with
No,
ACLU?
I just remember that was Sports Illustrated.
Oh, it was Sports Illustrated, yeah.
Pam Parsons.
Pam Parsons, yeah. I don't know, how many people remember this? Few of you, yeah.
The little known fact is Puss in Boots is the only bar in Utah that's mentioned in the congressional records of the United States.
That's probably because the membership book was introduced as evidence to prove.
Actually, it was because perjury was discussed in the congressional record, and Tina Buck and Pam Parsons were convicted of perjury.
So they were lesbians, and then Sports Illustrated announced that, and they sued for libel or whatever it was.
A lot of
Or
things
something?
were written in Sports Illustrated. There were allegations of drug use and grade fixing, and that Pam was having sex with a player. The sex with the player was the only thing that was true, which wasn't against the rules. They weren't drugs, there wasn't any of the other stuff going on, and a member of the Utah community got a fly up her ass, I'm gonna say, and took the book that had all of our signatures in it and took it and showed it to the court.
Yeah.
And I've seen it because my signature is in
Yeah.
that
So we were all
page.
fairly pissed off at our community member who took it upon herself to do this. And I think At that time, it was do not do cocaine and then make these decisions. Anyway, that was my opinion. I don't know what really went on, but
That's a detail I didn't know.
so anyway,
Story.
so in 80,
It's a long story.
and now I had also a program of Utah Women of Action awards. We would give awards to women who were feminists and had done something wonderful. Did you get one? No, you were after that. Sorry. Did everyone know Carol Gennady?
No.
This is this whole establishment here is due to Carol.
Oh, no.
We own it. It's furnished. It's a wonderful place. It has all sorts of services from the kids to us older people. So it's a great thing. And thank you, Carol. Anyway, so it used to be the churches, and the Presbyterian Church was one of the ones that first came out with a positive lesbian and gay policy. The MCC, which is Metropolitan Church of Christ, Community Church, was in a little church over on by the Board of Education, over there somewhere, like 7th South and 4th. I don't know, somewhere over in there. But there were a lot of events and meetings were held there. And for people who don't know, the Methodists are voting on this next month, on whether or not they're going to be inclusive of lesbian and gays, which seems...
Methodists?
The Methodists. And it's looking like it could really split the church. So anyway.
The Salt Lake Quaker,
Oh, the Quakers.
the Quakers, they approved a same-sex marriage minute, like with about the same time as you two married, because Robert and I got married through the Quakers up City Creek.
Up at City Creek, yeah, that was a great event. So, in '88, Rocky and Dan and Robert and who else? A group. You guys started the community council, and that was the Lesbian and Gay Community Council of Utah, and it was very empowering. We were, treated with respect by a lot of the other politicos around. I was always very sort of astounded, but officer friendly. Dave Ward, he would come to every meeting, and he was right there. He was a police officer. Any problems, he was eager to hear the problems and to help solve them, and very friendly and very non-judgmental and not homophobic in the least. And it was just like, wow, this is really something, and that community council sort of became the base for a lot of the political action and for the Pride festivals that we had.
And the Utah Stonewall Center.
And the Stonewall Center eventually, and which eventually became the Pride Center, sort of, if you follow that lineage. The Pride Festival that was at the Murray Park that Linda Lavin,
Kevin.
when was that?
91.
We had Linda Lavender in 91.
It was 91.
That's when the skinheads showed up.
Yeah.
So we were all at that park in a I can remember standing in a big circle. I mean, there was maybe 50 or 70, maybe 100 people. And
Well, there was closer to 200 or 300.
I'd say
it was okay. It was a lot of people, and then these skinheads were harassing us, and I don't know. You probably
They were. The detective that was there was told that they're more than welcome to stay as long as they don't chant. So when they started chanting, he took his finger and hit him in the chest and said, "You will leave now." And then one of our community members was trying to make friends with one of the couples that was there, not knowing they were part of the group. So it was a real interesting moment.
And by the way, Kevin Hillman is the next speaker in this series.
So
So
he has a lot to tell us next month.
And the other thing that happened there was that the 200 of us that were there surrounded
yeah,
the skinheads, and then we decided to turn our backs on them so that they were contained, but we weren't giving them our energy.
And we did the I love you sign. It was really powerful.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, they were scary. They had their Nazi battle flags out and
Yeah.
everything, so I mean, it was...
so we have some
There's a
strong
lot
bonds in this community of experiences that we've shared. In '92, there was the big lesbian and gay, I think it was '92, March on Washington. And we had a big contingent that went from Utah. I think there was over 200. I just want to say Val Mansfield, may he rest in peace, but he designed the T-shirt that we all had, and he also designed all the T-shirts, like probably the one that Rocky showed earlier, for the Now conferences. We always had a T-shirt every year with our conferences, and Val did all of that pro bono
Designed
for us.
all
He's
the
a great
posters
designer.
For all the Pride Days, all the T-shirts for Pride Days.
Yeah, everything. It's a great. It was a great loss when he died. But he had designed a T-shirt. I think it was bright pink, and we all had all these 200 people, and we met here a couple times before we left, and then we had a place in D.C. There where we met to amass when we went on the march together with our pink T-shirts, and it was really quite the time. It was take back the power thing, and there were, I mean, that was one of the big Washington marches where there was probably 500,000 people, and the whole town was taken over by us, and it was so empowering to go down into the metro on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Brenda because she was, and it was just all lesbian and gay people everywhere, and you know, every stop there'd be cheers coming up, and you know, and everybody got, you know, we got downtown to the mall, everyone got out, and it was really a fun and empowering and uniting event. I mean, how many of us went? Okay.
I went to the 87 one.
So,
An interesting tidbit, Lucy, is that the police in D.C. had to turn the escalators going down into the metro off because there was no room down there for anybody to get on the sides of the things. So
There's so many of us.
I thought that was interesting.
so I'm gonna, one thing I remember about the Now conferences was when Claire had moved here, we had a conference where we had invited Elizabeth Joseph, who is a polygamist who lives down in Bigwater, and she worked in Page. She and her sister wives lived with this man, what was his first name?
Alex Joseph.
Oh yeah, but anyway, so her thing was that this was a feminist lifestyle. She was living with her friends from college, her best friends. They all married the same guy. One was a doctor, these women, a lawyer, other thing. So the couple women stayed home, took care of the kids. The others went off to law school or med school, came back and had these careers. And her point was, we are living, she said, there's not that many good men. When you find one, let's share him. Anyway, so she, we invited her to speak. So then all hell broke out. In my job, I traveled all the time around Utah doing natural resources work. So Claire answers the phone, and it's the Today Show, and they're wanting me to fly to New York, and she's like, well, she's in Kanab or somewhere, you know. But, and we got a call from Australia, and, I mean, everyone wanted to know why was Now supporting polygamy. And it's like, no, we didn't want to support polygamy. We wanted to hear this point of view. Very different concept of how we could live our lives. And then the broader implication of that was, well, you know, if Brenda, Maureen, Paul, Sean, me, and Claire want to live together in a big house, what is wrong with that? Share the work, you know what I mean? Or whatever. I mean, that all these different lifestyles that you could have were okay and legal as being Americans who are able to choose how they want to live. So that was the whole point of that. But it really caused a firestorm, and people were very upset.
Remember your brother got the call?
They actually
Feminazi.
Oh yeah. My brother called me and said, I just heard on Rush Limbaugh that you are a feminazi.
Funny.
I was like, really? Okay. What's a feminazi?
Who's Rush Limbaugh?
Better question. So anyway, so that, and you know, and then the Pride, so Kathy Worthington, I just have to say, and Sarah Hamlin really did a huge amount of work for this community and developed the Stonewall Center, and that's evolved into the Pride Center. And we need to remember them in our prayers or whatever you do. It's very tragic that after Sarah died of cancer, Kathy committed suicide, but they were just rock solid activists in this community and a big part of it. The Stonewall Center was on 3rd West, and it was where Ruby Snaps cookies is now. Yeah. So and we all spent a great amount of time there. It was an old, I think, garage.
It started out as a garage, and then that's where our Pride T-shirts were made for several years, and that's how we found out it was available.
Oh, it was a printing press. So it was industrial, but we had, it was a bigger space, area with couches and lounge, and had a big library and other things like that. And they really are the ones, at least Kathy poured her heart and soul into that place. And then eventually that same group morphed into what this has become. I can't really remember the transition, or how that happened, but it is the same core of people who moved on.
The Gay and Lesbian Center.
The what?
The Gay and Lesbian Center.
Yeah, on 3rd
And
West.
then that, they went through a name change, the Utah Pride Center from there.
Yeah. So things really have changed. I mean, when I first came here, I remember a meeting, now had a PAC, a Political Action Committee, which gives money to candidates. So I remember it was me, Deb Burrington, another, I never did say the names of the collective members, which I meant to do, Ingrid, right there.
Which collective?
The 20 Root Collective, the bookstore collective. That was Abby Maestas, Marilyn Haig, Ingrid, Melanie Cherry, Deb Burrington, Judy Morrison, and Karen Jones.
Charlene Archer.
Who?
Charlene.
No, Charlene was not part of the collective.
Oh, okay.
But Charlene was very active in the community council.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit later. There's a couple more members of the collective that I'm not remembering about. There were 12 of us. And the collective is another thing that you could write a book about, the collective era. There were collectives, sort of a socialized way of doing business where women came together and were a unit and were making decisions, trying to use consensus, which is shoot me now, I hate consensus. But using consensus to make decisions and trying to make sure that all the different issues were addressed and that everybody was happy with the decision that we made. And that is not easy. So anyway, where was I going with that? I'm reading. Yeah, it's really a really rich and vibrant history here of the lesbian and gay community. And as Ben and Rocky can tell you, it goes way back. So, we have a lot of roots in...
Are you going to speak about the older and wiser lesbian group?
Oh, owls. So when Women Aware died out, owls came in, older, wiser lesbians, and that group was... It was one of these, social community groups that was trying to provide a place for women to come together, and was very active in the late 80s, early 90s, right on my time? Yeah. I can never get confused with that. I was talking about PAC. Okay. Deb Burrington, me, I think maybe Melanie Cherry, and somebody else were interviewing Karen Shepard, maybe Frances Farley, a couple women, 4 or 5 women. I think also maybe Frank Piganelli. I don't know. They all were coming to, they'd filled out our questionnaire, and then we had to come in and talk to them about why should we give you some money. And we had this awful moment where they were just like, we can't take money if we have to say the word lesbian and gay. And that's where they were then. I mean, that was, and so rather than take our $1,000, they turned it down, and we were disgusted with them and sort of said, it's all changed now. And, we're more accepted, but it was not socially condoned by straight society then to be an out lesbian. And there
We're gonna
were.
say you support gay and lesbian people.
Yeah.
Don't
I know
forget-
when I met Claire and went back to Ohio, and all her friends were closeted teachers. They were totally afraid of me that I was going to out them. I mean, they were like, "Oh, what are you doing, Claire? Who's this woman?" But it was a way of life, you know. I mean, people. That's the way they lived. They lived in a very narrow closet, and
When they went out to dinner, they were a bowling team in their minds.
Of course. It's the Midwest.
Right.
yeah,
Don't say lesbian out loud in
Yeah.
the restaurant.
yeah, which I would do. So anyway,
Don't
Rock-
forget, don't forget back in that era, 80s, I'm guessing, Becky Moss's Third Thursday potluck.
Oh.
Well, that was, Lucy was beyond that. She didn't need a potluck.
no, but that was another thing. Becky opened her home on third Thursdays, and there was a potluck, and anybody could show up. And her house was over on Commonwealth, which is like over there, right? Anyway, and that was a big happening. And for a while there were these. This was so I wasn't much as involved, but these groups that met in geographically in parts of town and had a barbecue or a get together. I'm trying to remember who was in charge
Linda
of that.
Lee,
Who?
Linda Lee.
Linda Lee was one.
Yeah, Linda Lee and
Were
yeah.
you involved with
It was the
women,
potlucks.
women on wheels?
Oh, Women on Wheels. Yeah, there was a group of dykes,
Campouts?
dykes on bikes.
Dykes.
Swerve.
We used to have dykes on bikes lead off with every pride parade, and now there would be a bunch of them, and now where are they? I don't
There
know.
were a couple last year. There were 2 women.
2 last year, but there used to be 50. You
The
know.
2 on motor scooters. It's a little different.
Jazzies.
That's about it.
Lucy, do you remember one year when it was, the women had all gotten Harley Davidson, great big
Yes.
bikes, and they'd gone down to the parade, and then at the very tail end was Patty Reagan on a little scooter?
It was Patty this year.
Yeah. So, Rocky?
I just wanted to tell you, when you're done with your remarks, I have a few mundane questions to ask you, so I'll come up. front.
I'm pretty much done, so ask me
Okay,
questions. Or anybody, whatever.
Should we
Anybody?
open it to other questions
Yeah, let's
first,
go
or?
ahead and open it to everybody, but go ahead and.
Yeah, do anybody have questions or comments for Lucy?
Lucy, can you tell them about the people that you had as friendships that you brought into town, like Eleanor Schmell and those things?
Well,
You had these people in your car. You had the organizer of, you know.
We had now meetings here, and Molly Yard was here, who was the president of now after Eleanor Smeel. Patricia Island was here, who was the president of now, but at that time she was vice president. Kim Gandy was another vice president. Olga Vivas, who is a very dynamic Cuban woman, was here. Rosemary Dempsey was another vice president. So those women would come in when we had our conferences and help us. You know, they would lead workshops, and people would participate. And none of them, all of those women were here at separate times. They weren't here together. So 1 or 2 would come for each conference, but it was, it's very.
Now that Gloria Steinem came?
Oh, well, Gloria Steinem wasn't here with now, but she was here several times. A Woman's Place Books, Sally Smith's store, brought Gloria 2 times. And the one time that we probably both remember, Brenda, this was at, what is that place called up there?
On Foothill Plaza.
The what?
It was in Foothill.
Oh, Foothill Plaza, that's right,
Yeah.
name of it. And it was a cold winter day, I remember that. There's like 2,500 women in the parking lot. And because you couldn't get in anymore, it was just, the cops were everywhere. There had been, I found out later, death threats on Gloria. And Gloria said, this has happened one other time in her whole traveling career, you know, and she's a traveling woman, man. She goes everywhere. But here she was, you know, threatened, death threats, and we're going to kill those Jewish bitch dykes, things like that. The cops were very involved and very helpful. And some of this is in my recent memory because I'm taking a class from Sally Smith right now, and we just sort of talked about that the other day. But yeah, those were the days. The bookstore era was really, there were 100 or so bookstores across the country, these feminist bookstores, of which 20 Rue Jacob was one, the collective. But then later, 10 years later or so, that's when Sally opened a Woman's Place Books, which was sort of on the tail end. There are 1 or 2 surviving bookstores. There's Antigone Books in Tucson, has a small portion of a huge store that is still lesbian books, and like an old-fashioned lesbian bookstore. There's one in San Antonio, or is it Austin, called Bookwoman. There's a few left, but they're almost all gone.
Naiad Press?
Naiad Press. There was all sorts of different women's... Annette, you know a lot about this. Yeah, there were different women's presses. There were really famous lesbian authors. Rita Mae Brown maybe was the first with her Juicy Fruit Jungle. I mean, that got...
Ruby Fruit.
Juicy Fruit.
Juicy Fruit. That came from you, Ben. Anyway.
Juicy Couture.
So there are lots of famous lesbian authors and presses during that era. Yeah, Kevin.
You're here before me, but can you talk a little bit about how the men's and women's community interacted when you first got here in the gay and lesbian community, and what that was like?
The men and the women's community?
You know, the gay men.
Gay men and
Well,
lesbian.
you know, I wasn't aware of the gay men's community until I met you. I mean, I knew there were the bars, and there were some guys that, you know, when at the Sun that were friendly, but we really didn't have any.
It took a while to build bridges.
Yeah.
But we did.
Yeah.
Some of it was AIDS activism and men dying and the women taking care of us, thank God.
Well, yeah, and that was before, that was, well, it was during this, and Dr. Reese, too, I did write her down. We all have to thank the stars for Dr. Reese and Maggie Snyder, who were, Kristen Reese was the only doctor who would see people with AIDS in Utah, western Colorado, southern Idaho, and southwestern Wyoming. No other medical doctors would see people who had AIDS. And she was my doctor, and then it got so I couldn't even get in to see her, and I had to find another doctor. Who was Cindy Bateman, who then left her practice. I'm like, anyway.
And it was regular turkey.
Yeah. Wonderful lesbian doctors. But anyway, Kristen, and if you haven't seen Quiet Heroes, the movie, the documentary about what Kristen and Maggie did, you must see it. It won some awards last year at Sundance. It's up for some other big award I just read about.
GLAAD Award.
Right now, a GLAAD Award, yeah. And it's about the work they did. Kristen started and then Maggie joined in making sure there was adequate, more than adequate, health care for men with AIDS. And it is true that at that time, 99% of the caretaking was done by lesbians. And that was, you know, and the hospital was Holy Names. The nuns would take patients there who had AIDS, but nowhere else.
Holy Cross?
What?
Holy Cross Hospital?
Holy Cross, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say that one? Okay, sorry.
Sisters.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier about the mainstream nature of things and how I sense like there are some things you disagree with it. Do you mind clarifying what exactly you mean by things being mainstream and why you
Well,
feel
now
like
nobody
that?
seems to care if you're lesbian or gay. It's acceptable. And it's no big deal. So, but in the mainstreaming, so there used to be like Olivia Records and other, I know we're running out of time here, and other lesbian-only record company producing albums by lesbian women, by and for women. that's all sort of disappeared now because it's been subsumed into the larger.
Patriarchal society.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there used to
So,
be a
you know,
lesbian culture
and
that's kinda
it used to
disappeared.
be, it was a very special, fun time when we all got together for a dance or a concert. And you saw all the other lesbians, and nobody else was there. We could be ourselves. We could, you know, do whatever we wanted and not be confined by, you know, when you're out and about, you can't be yourself. You couldn't be yourself then. You know, you couldn't walk down the street and hold hands, or kiss your lover, you
There
know,
was
in
no
public.
such thing as allies back in those days. That's
Yeah,
one of the things that
allies. So they were
you know,
allies,
we
which
were
meant they
allies.
were okay with us, but they didn't really. I don't know.
They weren't allies.
Lucy?
Yeah.
I think one of the ways you can explain that is you look at a major company doing a commercial right now, and you go through and you see the straight couple, the mixed race couple, the gay men couple, the lesbian couple, and then that. And you would have never saw that
No.
back then.
No. I think that's Subaru.
It's actually an insurance company that I know.
Oh, that's what. So things have really, I mean, they have changed. You know, we're still going to have to work on this trans phobia problem, but.
Biphobia.
Yeah, biphobia.
But the mainstreaming is mostly positive, right?
Right.
It's just that we lost that special, we're so unique and special.
Yeah, and that was a wonderful thing, you know, that we. And it's hard to explain to people who never experienced it. Like, what are you talking about? Well, it was real and it was important, and it really shaped, I think, a lot of our lives.
Back when queerness meant something.
And queer's another word that some people don't like. You know, I mean, I've grown to accept it, but I'm a lesbian, and that was, you know, the way I identify myself.
Word at one time.
So as a bi, lesbian, trans woman, I have a particular interest in learning about where were the bi people and the trans people back then, and were they ever part of?
I don't know where they were because they weren't visible.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to.
I mean, first of all, the word trans wasn't even a word
Right.
No.
in the 80s or whatever.
They used to, any kind of phone lines, helplines at that time, when anybody had transgender issues that we would call today, they referred them to the Royal Court of the Golden Spike Empire because they had cross-dressers and drag queens and things like that. So that was beyond anybody's understanding at that time because, you know, we were just
Right.
trying to deal with our sexual orientation at that time, not get arrested. you know?
Right.
And
No,
so,
I get that. It's just
Yeah, no, the people, they were even more closeted. And the court is something that we all should know about. They raise huge amounts of money
They're amazing.
for charities.
And there were a lot of women in the court system. They always was accepted in there. In fact, the first emperor of the royal court was a woman
In Salt Lake.
in Salt Lake City.
So,
But as far as bi, I think we all thought that that's just someone who hadn't fully come out yet.
yeah,
We've
I
been
mean,
proven wrong.
it's been an evolution.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you. And so I'm going to ask you some mundane questions.
Yes.
What is your full Muggle name?
Lucia Malin, Luciamalin.
When were you born?
June 29th, 1951,
Where?
San Francisco.
San Francisco County, California.
San Francisco,
I'm
San Francisco.
a professional genealogist.
Okay,
so
San
these-
Francisco City and County, they're the same unit. California.
And the names of your mother's full name?
Sarah Louise Arpe, A-R-P-E, Malin. My dad was Jacob Malin.
He had no middle name?
No middle name.
Okay.
I have no middle name.
And how many siblings do you have?
I have one sister and one brother.
What order are you in?
I'm the eldest.
Okay, and and then the next sibling,
It's
their
my,
name?
My sister, Deborah, Katie, C-A-D-Y, Criswell, C-R-I-S-W-E-L-L.
And your brother's name?
Charles Andrew Malin.
Okay. Where'd you go to high school?
Miramonte High School, Orinda, Contra Costa County, California, by Moraga, just over the hill from Berkeley.
Okay. And you went to UC Davis. That was
I
your
went to UC Berkeley,
first. Okay.
and then I went to Davis.
So you got your bachelor's at Berkeley,
I did
and then a master's
at Davis,
at Davis.
and I did my first year at UC Santa Barbara,
Okay.
which was not a party school then.
What year did you graduate from Berkeley?
1973.
Wow, you were kind of there during the hippie era.
I was there during the Vietnam era.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yum.
That X quarter, do people remember the X quarter? Where they just sort of passed you on your classes, but the school, UC, University of California, shut down. So there were no classes, but they just passed everybody. That was very odd. So on your transcript it says X, the X quarter. Anyway.
But you were in marches and stuff.
Oh yeah, everybody was in the
Yeah,
peace marches
everybody
to
was
end
in
the war.
marches.
It was there was no. I mean, one of my gives me chills memories is walking down from the ferry building to Golden Gate Park, but turning back and looking down Market Street, and it was just solid people. I mean, it was just so many people, and then into Golden Gate Park, and again, I don't know, 1 million people, and it was really, we did shut it down, and I keep saying that, when is this going to happen with Trump? When are we going to shut it down? And it doesn't happen, but it's a different era. But people were in the streets, I think everywhere, Madison, everywhere. And it just got to the point where the country couldn't go on with that war. So.
What year did you get your degree at Davis?
1978.
78, okay. And then in 79 you went to Santa Barbara?
No, I went to Corvallis.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you went to UC Santa Barbara.
My first year of college as a freshman was in 69. Was at Santa Barbara.
Oh,
and
okay, thank
we
you.
burned down the Bank of America. I don't say we, but I was there. I remember seeing. I mean, I saw
NSA,
it.
you're not listening to this. And are you married, or you have a partner?
This is Claire, my wife.
You're legally married. What
The day that everybody in the world got married here, December 23rd, 2013.
And Claire, do you mind having your full name on
Sure.
record?
It's Elizabeth Claire Mantonya, Mantonya.
Awesome. Anything else we should know personally? Like, okay.
The Grateful Dead always played at our high school. That's something.
Are you an old stoner?
That was in 67, 68.
The reason for all these questions is
I know,
not
it's
because
gonna be
Colin's
archived.
nosy. It's because we're preserving all these as part of a video archive, and so we need this information for that, and so we're grateful that you're giving us that information.
But if you did jot it all down, there's a slight chance that you can steal her identity.
Oh, what's your social security number? And your pet's name.
Mother's maiden name.
All right, well, Lucy,
Maybe your fourth grade teacher.
you rocked. Thank you so much,
Oh, this was fun. Thank you.
So, do you want to talk about Kevin now, or?
Well, if you enjoy these kind of get-togethers, and it's kind of for some of us old folks, it's kind of almost a family reunion to see people. Our next speaker, hopefully we're going to get the last Wednesday of every month. So we're trying to get it set up with the scheduling that we can be on, on a regular basis. And so our next month, the last Wednesday in the month, we're going to have Kevin Hillman speaking. Kevin Hillman's going to speak hopefully on the Rodeo Association and his dealing with the Nazis at our Pride Day festivals and a lot of other things that should be really interesting. So I hope you'll all come back. And if I knew you guys were going to be such a big crowd, I would have made more cookies.
Do you know the date?
I don't know. I think it's the 27th.
It's the 27th.
I think it's the 27th of February.
At 6:30.
At 6:30 here. It'll always be at 6:30 on the last Wednesday of the month. thank you for coming. Oh, I should say, next Wednesday, on always the first Wednesdays of the month, I run a historical society called the Utah Stonewall Historical Society, which I go over the chronology of our histories of our community. And I've been doing that for about 2 years now, and we're up to 1991. So if you're interested in 1991 at all, we'll be talking about that next Wednesday. So, anyway, thank you. Huh? It's here. This room. It's always in this good room. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock.
Next Wednesday at 7.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Nice job, Lucy.
There's three.
You might have heard that.
You doing okay?
Yeah.
Are you guys heading or? No, we're gonna get a bite to eat though. Yeah, we didn't eat.
It's very, you did great. You did a wonderful job, you little rebels.